You forged my signature for $20,000. I was holding the contract, my name printed bold, the debt unmistakable. The ink was still fresh, like the betrayal had only just begun to bleed. But nothing hurt more than what came next. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Only you can save Diego." Her voice wasn't cracked with guilt. It was expectant, like I owed it to them. Like it was normal to turn your daughter into collateral. And Diego? He didn't even flinch. He smirked. "You're the practical one, sis. This is what you do." That's when I realized I wasn't part of a family. I was their safety net. And the worst part? I was 27 when I found out the truth. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had spent a decade stealing my life. But when I packed my bag for Chicago that night, I didn't tell them what else I took. Neon bled through the blinds as I slipped out the door. My hands were shaking, but my jaw was set. If you've ever felt like love came with a receipt you didn't sign, drop a comment. Don't hold it in. I didn't. Funny how one forged signature can crack open every lie you thought was love. 3 nights earlier, neon light bleeds through the thin curtains, painting the peeling wallpaper in streaks of pink and blue. I'm sitting at our kitchen table, the vinyl crackle of one of Mom's old records filling the room with a ghost of her past life. She's humming along from the couch, cigarette smoke curling upward, eyes half closed like she's still on some dim stage in a forgotten club. Little Havana never sleeps. Even from up here, 3 floors above the street, I can hear salsa beats spilling out of the bar on the corner, mingling with the sharp laughter of people who aren't counting pennies. I wipe down the sticky tabletop with the hem of my work shirt, trying not to think about how much I made tonight, and how quickly it'll vanish. I bartend at a place tourists love, all glowing bottles and overpriced cocktails. I slip tips into my apron pocket, imagining them piling up in the coffee shop I've been dreaming about since I was 18. A place with warm wood counters, the smell of espresso in the air, the hum of conversation. I can almost hear the hiss of the steam wand, see my name on the lease. But dreams don't last long here, not in this apartment, not with Mom and Diego. Diego's in his room now, guitar in his lap, plucking some moody tune. He's good, he's always been good, but good doesn't pay bills. Mom calls him our star, like the world's just waiting to hear him. Me? I'm the practical one, the one who picks up shifts, who keeps the lights on, who gets asked for just a little help until Friday, and then never sees Friday come. I slide my phone across the table, open the banking app, and see the number. Smaller than it should be. Again, I can already guess why. My fingertips find the tiny coffee bean charm hanging on a thin silver chain around my neck. It's warm from my skin. My grandma gave it to me on my 17th birthday, said, "So you never forget the taste of your own dreams." From the couch, Mom calls out, "Mia, you working tomorrow?" I keep my voice even. "Double shift." "That's good. You've always been strong like that. Diego's got a gig this weekend. Might be his big break." Her words hang in the air, sweet and heavy, like she's handing me a compliment, but all I hear is the part she doesn't say out loud, "And we might need your help to make it happen." The neon outside flickers, pink, blue, pink again. I think about all the nights I've come home exhausted, smelling like tequila and lime, my wrists aching from hauling crates of beer. I think about the little envelopes of cash I've slipped into Mom's hand, the times Diego promised to pay me back when things took off. Every time I tell myself it's fine. They're family. Families help each other. But lately, there's this quiet voice in the back of my head, whispering questions I don't want to answer. Am I just the safety net? Am I anything to them besides the girl who works too much and hands over her savings? I watch Mom tap ash into a chipped mug. Her face softens when she talks about Diego, eyes lighting up in a way they never do for me. It's not jealousy. It's more like being invisible in your own house. The record skips, catching on a groove. Outside, a siren wails and fades. Diego's guitar drifts to a stop. For a moment, it's quiet enough to hear the hum of the fridge. I imagine my life without the constant pull of their needs, without the guilt that clings to me every time I think about keeping my money for myself. I shake the thought away. Guilt is a stubborn thing. It grows roots. The coffee bean charm rests in my palm now, cool and small, the chain pooled like liquid silver. I squeeze it until the edges bite into my skin. My grandma believed in me, more than anyone else ever has. Some days I think she's the only one who ever did. The door to Diego's room creaks open. He leans in the doorway, hair messy, grin lazy. "Hey, sis, you got $20? I'll pay you back after the gig." I don't even answer. Just stare at him until he shrugs and disappears again. Mom's voice drifts from the couch, softer now, almost like a lullaby. "Diego's our star, Mia. You're the one who keeps us grounded." Grounded. Like an anchor. Like something heavy that stays put so the shiny thing can drift wherever it wants. I get up, rinse my glass in the sink, and head for my room. The neon glow follows me down the hall, painting my shadow in strange colors. I can still hear the faint strum of Diego's guitar starting up again, like a soundtrack to a story I'm not sure I want to be in anymore. Lying in bed, I tuck the charm under my pillow. The hum of the city fills the silence, but I'm listening to something else, something inside me that's getting harder to ignore. Because every time I hand over what I've worked for, every time I smile and say it's fine, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not really part of this family. Not the way Diego is. Not in the way that matters to them, and I can't help wondering, why do they keep taking from me? The city was still buzzing when I came home, the bass from some club down the street thumping through the walls. I dropped my keys on the counter and kicked off my heels, my feet aching from hours behind the bar. My apron, still heavy with the smell of lime and whiskey, hung off one shoulder. All I wanted was a shower and sleep. But habit won. I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumbed open my banking app. The number made no sense. My stomach dropped. $8,000, 3 years of tip jars and double shifts, was gone. Not low, not withdrawn for rent, gone. A clean, empty space where my future used to sit. The kitchen light flickered overhead, buzzing like a trapped fly. Mom was at the table, cigarette balanced between her fingers, ash building into a fragile tower. She looked up, saw my face, and didn't even flinch. What happened to my account? My voice came out too calm, the kind of calm that means something's about to snap. She exhaled smoke and waved her free hand, like brushing away a mosquito. Diego borrowed it, just for his demo. You know how important this is, his last chance. Borrowed? The word tasted like metal in my mouth. That was all I had. Her eyes softened, not with guilt, but with pleading. He'll pay you back, mija. When he hits it big, you'll get it all and more. You've always been strong enough to wait. Somewhere in the apartment, Diego's guitar strings rang out, lazy and smug. A blues riff, bent notes hanging in the air like they knew they had all the time in the world. I stared at her. You didn't even ask me. She stubbed out the cigarette, lit another in the same motion. The stale smell wrapped around me, clinging to my hair, my clothes, my skin. You'd have said no, she said simply. I wanted to yell, to slam my hands on the table and shake her until she saw me, not the practical one, not the safety net, but her daughter who worked until her hands cracked. But her eyes were glassy now, rimmed with tears. If this doesn't work for him, Mia, I don't know what happens to him. She was crying for him, always for him. I swallowed the words burning in my throat. The fluorescent bulb hummed above us, casting shadows in the deep lines around her mouth. I told myself to walk away before I said something I couldn't take back. In my room, I peeled off my work shirt and threw it over a chair, but I couldn't let it go. $8,000. Every refill, every wipe table, every Saturday night I gave up. It was all sitting in someone else's pocket now. I drifted back toward the kitchen, drawn by the sound of her lighter clicking. On the counter, a small jewelry box sat half open. It was her mother's once, mahogany chipped at the corners, the hinges squeaky. She kept her important things in there. I don't even know why I opened it. Maybe because I already knew there was nothing I could trust anymore. Inside were old rings, a folded photograph of Diego as a boy, and at the bottom, an envelope. Yellowed, creased, with 3 words written in Mom's looping script. Don't let Mia know. My pulse hammered in my ears. The kitchen felt smaller, the air thicker. I slid the envelope out, turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight, or the lack of it. No check. No thick stack of papers. Just one thin sheet inside. Diego's guitar stopped. A floorboard creaked in the hall. I shoved the envelope back into the box, closed the lid, and stepped away, pretending to fuss with the sink. Mom came in, hair flattened on one side from where she'd been leaning on her hand. "You still mad?" I didn't look at her, just thinking. She sighed, reached past me for another cigarette, the ashtray already full to the brim. "It's just temporary, Mia. Diego's so close to a breakthrough, you'll see." I kept my back to her, eyes fixed on the cracked tile above the sink. The sound of her lighter was sharp, final. Smoke drifted over my shoulder, curling toward the weak light. I went to my room, closed the door, and leaned against it. My phone was still in my hand, the banking app open like a wound. I thought about the envelope, the ink on those 3 words. Don't let Mia know. Maybe I was crazy to think they'd ever pay me back. Maybe I'd been crazy all along to believe I was anything but their bank. The neon outside my window flickered once, twice, then held steady. I lay down without turning off the light, my mind chasing questions that had no answers yet, at least none they wanted me to hear. And somewhere under the floorboards of this apartment, the truth waited, just as restless as me. The envelope had been sitting in my mind all night like a thorn I couldn't pull out. By morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, washing the room in that cold, flat glow that makes everything look harsher than it should. Mom's jewelry box was back in its usual spot on the counter, as if it hadn't just held something meant to be kept from me. I took out the envelope, fingers trembling just enough to make the paper crinkle. The glue on the flap gave way with a soft tear. Inside, a single scrap of paper. No letter, no explanation, just 5 ink strokes that didn't belong together. DV. $20,000. That was it. No signature, no date, just those initials and a number that made my stomach tighten. I didn't even think. I crossed the hall and knocked on Diego's door hard enough to make the frame rattle. He opened it shirtless, hair sticking up like he'd just rolled out of bed. The lazy grin was already there. "Morning, sis?" I held up the paper. "What is this?" He glanced at it, smirk curling deeper. "Don't freak out, sis. You'll get your cut." "My cut?" I heard my voice go sharp. "This isn't funny, Diego. Who's DV? And why is 20 grand next to his name?" He reached out like he was going to take the paper, but I pulled it back. "You're overthinking. It's nothing you need to worry about." "Nothing I bit down on the rest. He was already turning away, reaching for his guitar like I wasn't still standing there with proof that something was rotting underneath our roof. Mom's voice floated in from the living room. "Mia, let it go. Family sticks together." I turned toward her. She was sitting on the couch, cigarette in hand, eyes fixed on the TV. But when I asked again, "Who's DV, Mom?" her gaze flicked toward me, just for a second, before she looked back at the screen. It was enough. Her glance was quick, nervous, and it told me more than any answer could. I didn't push, not then. Instead, I nodded like I was done, folded the paper in half and slipped it into my back pocket. That night, the apartment was still. Mom was in her room. Diego's guitar had gone quiet. I waited another hour, pacing my room with the coffee bean charm warm in my fist. When I finally eased his door open, the air inside was thick with the smell of old beer and cologne. Moonlight cut a pale stripe across the mess, guitar picks scattered on the floor, crumpled clothes piled high, an ashtray balanced on an amp. He was on his stomach, one arm hanging off the bed, breathing slow. I stepped around the creaky spot near the dresser and found his phone on the nightstand. My pulse was in my ears. Every tap on the screen felt louder than it was. No DV in his contacts, no initials in recent calls. I scrolled deeper, thumb moving fast, until a message thread caught my eye. No name, just a number. The last text read, "The deal's ready. She won't see it coming." My grip on the phone tightened. The glow from the screen lit up my hands, pale and unsteady. I swiped back through older messages, cryptic lines about timing, the handoff, covering tracks. Not one word I could tie to something harmless. The floor creaked behind me, but it was just him shifting in his sleep. I shoved the phone back exactly where it had been and back toward the door, holding my breath until I was in the hall. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the charm in my palm. The silver chain pooled between my fingers like spilled mercury. If I kept digging, I'd find out, but I knew once I did, there'd be no going back. Whatever line I thought I'd never cross with my own family, I was already on the other side. I was done being their doormat. Time to find out what they were hiding. The glow from Diego's phone screen had barely faded from my mind when the old memory pushed its way in, uninvited but sharp. like it had been waiting for the right crack to slip through. I sat on the edge of my bed, the coffee bean charm resting in my palm, its weight heavier than silver had any right to be. I was 18 again. The Miami heat was thicker back then, or maybe I just remember it that way. My acceptance letter lay flat on the kitchen table, the college crest stamped in deep blue. A full ride for business courses, my ticket to learning everything I'd need to open that coffee shop I used to doodle in my notebooks. I remember tracing the edges of that letter, already tasting the espresso I'd serve, smelling the pastries baking in the back. Mom stood by the window, smoke curling up around her hair. "Mia," she said, drawing out the word like it was the start of bad news, "we need to talk about Diego." He was in the next room, guitar in his lap, playing something bright and fast. Her eyes were softer than usual, but it wasn't the softness you get from love. It was persuasion, honey poured over a trap. "The Academy accepted him," she said. "A real music program. This is his shot, Mia." I glanced at my letter. "That's great for him, but we can't afford both," she cut in, stepping closer. "Your wages. If you take that coffee shop job full-time instead of school, we can cover his tuition. Just for a year. He'll be famous by then, and you can go back." The words family duty slid in between her sentences like they'd been rehearsed. I stared at her, waiting for the part where she said she was joking, but the only sound was Diego's strumming, a rhythm too quick, too careless for someone about to get their big break. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan clicking every few seconds. I told myself it was just a pause. 1 year wouldn't matter. I was strong enough to wait. I told myself a lot of things. By the time fall came, my college letter was buried in a drawer. I was working 6 days a week, handing Mom envelopes of cash every Friday. She'd smile, kiss my cheek, and say, "You're holding this family together, Mia." Diego lasted 1 semester. The night he dropped out, he came home smelling like beer and cheap perfume, laughing too loud at something on his phone. I remember Mom asking how his classes were going, and him shrugging like it didn't matter. She didn't yell, didn't even frown. 2 days later, I overheard her on the phone with a friend saying she knew he wasn't serious, but you never know when things might click for him. I was in the hallway, out of her sight. My hands were damp from washing dishes, and the steam had made the coffee bean charm stick to my collarbone. That was the first time it occurred to me that my dream might have been disposable to her all along. Back in the present, sitting in my dim apartment, I could still feel that 18-year-old version of me, the one who thought sacrifice was a currency you could trade for love. I ran my thumb over the tiny ridges carved into the charm. Diego's laughter from down the hall was fainter now, but it still carried the same note it had back then, the sound of someone who never had to pay for the breaks they got. "I gave up my future for Diego," I whispered into the quiet, and they didn't even blink. The bitterness settled in my chest like old dust. It wasn't just about the $8,000 anymore. It was about a lifetime of being the one who waited, the one who patched the holes, the one who got told she was strong enough to handle it while everyone else took what they wanted. I closed my fist around the charm until its edges pressed into my skin. If they thought I was still that girl, willing to hand over my dreams and smile while doing it, they were about to find out how wrong they were. The words from that text, "She won't see it coming," had been scratching at the back of my skull since I read them. By the next night, I couldn't stand sitting in the apartment pretending not to know. So when Diego slipped out just after 9, guitar case slung over one shoulder, I followed. Little Havana's streets were damp from a quick evening shower, the air heavy with the smell of wet asphalt and fried plantains drifting from the corner cafe. I kept far enough back to blend into the foot traffic, pulling my hoodie up when he glanced over his shoulder. He turned down a side street, away from the lights and noise. The open sign of a dive bar blinked half dead in the humid dark, its O flickering like it couldn't decide if it wanted to exist. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and something sour. Stale beer, maybe, or just the floor itself. I slipped into a shadowed corner near the jukebox, the sticky floor tugging at my sneakers. From there, I could see Diego slide into a booth. The man across from him was impossible to miss. Slicked back hair, a vest so shiny it caught the light from the neon, and rings that clicked when he moved his hands. The sound of their voices was muffled by the hum of a half-broken ceiling fan and the dull thud of pool balls in the back. I edged closer, using a column for cover. That's when I heard it. "My sister's naive. She'll never see it coming." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I didn't already suspect, but because he said them like a joke, like I was just some easy mark. They leaned in over a stack of papers. The vest guy tapped one with a thick finger, nodding like he'd just approved a deal. Diego chuckled, the sound low and confident in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. My phone was already in my hand. I angled it just enough to snap a quick photo of the man's face, the gleam of his vest. The click was silent, but in that instant Diego's eyes flicked up. I dropped into the shadow, pressing my back against the wall, pulse hammering in my throat. A bead of sweat slid down my neck. I could hear my own breathing over the jukebox's warbling attempt at an old salsa hit. Their conversation picked up again, lower now. I caught fragments. Deadline, cover, cash ready. Cash. My stomach turned. The pieces clicked faster than I wanted them to. That scrap of paper in Mom's jewelry box. DV, $20,000. And now this man in the gaudy vest. The text from Diego's phone. DV has the cash ready. This wasn't just him being reckless. This was deliberate. He wasn't in over his head. He was dragging me into the water with him. The thought burned through me as I eased toward the door, keeping my head down. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner, though my chest was still tight. I walked fast, phone clutched in my palm. The photo of the vest guy glaring up at me under the streetlight. Loan shark, Mom's friend, the same initials from that envelope. By the time I reached the main street, my hoodie was damp with sweat despite the night air. I wanted to turn around, storm in there, throw the photo in his face, but that would have been exactly what he expected. Me showing my hand before I even knew the whole game. No, I'd wait, watch, and the next move would be mine, because Diego wasn't just gambling with his future anymore. He was setting me up to take the fall. The photo of the vest guy was still open on my phone when I spotted the corner of a folder sticking out of Diego's guitar bag. I don't even know why I looked. Maybe because, after last night, I didn't trust the air between us. The folder was cheap, the kind you'd grab from a drugstore, bent at the edges. Inside was a contract. My name was printed at the top in bold letters, followed by numbers that made my pulse thud in my ears. $20,000. Debt. My signature forged so neatly I almost believed I'd signed it. I set it on my bed and stared at it, the paper trembling in my hands even though the air was still. Somewhere outside, the neon from the bar down the street pulsed red through my blinds, steady as a heartbeat. It felt like it was counting down to something. My fingers found the coffee bean charm at my throat. Cold now, heavy. And suddenly I was 16 again, back in my old bedroom, the one with the curling posters of bands I swore I'd see live one day. The scent of coconut lotion and cheap perfume hung in the air. I'd been saving for months, babysitting, stocking shelves at the corner market, tucking away crumpled bills in a shoebox under my bed until I had $500. Diego burst in without knocking, his smile wide enough to swallow the whole room. "Mia, I need your help. Big audition. This could be it for me." I remember the way he said me, like it included both of us. Like my win was tied to his. I dug out the shoebox, the weight of it solid in my hands. I clutched the charm before I gave it to him, as if that tiny piece of silver could make the money stretch far enough to change our lives. "Pay you back after the gig," he promised, already halfway out the door. The next night, I heard the music from 3 blocks away. Too loud, too sloppy to be an audition. When I got to the house, strangers spilled out onto the lawn, red cups in hand. Inside, Diego was laughing, his arm slung over a girl I'd never seen before. My $500 had bought him beer, not a shot at a career. I confronted him later, but he just shrugged, eyes glassy. "It's fine. There'll be other auditions." When I told Mom, she laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Boys need fun, Mia. Don't be so serious." That night I cried into my pillow, the charm pressed into my palm until it left a mark. I understood then, not fully but enough, that in their eyes I was a resource, not a sister. Back in the present, the contract lay on my bed like proof I hadn't been wrong. Not then, not now. The neon glow through the blinds flared, faded, flared again, painting the paper in bloody light. My thumb traced the edge of the charm. 16-year-old me had let it go. 27-year-old me wouldn't. They'd taken my money, my dreams, my trust, no more. Tomorrow I'd confront them both. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, hammering the tin awning outside my window, drumming on the air conditioners stacked along the brick wall. By night, it turned the street into a black river reflecting the blurred neon from the bodega across the way. I stepped out into it with the contract in my hand, the paper already starting to curl from the damp. Diego and Mom were in the courtyard, huddled under the dim light by the stairwell. He saw me first. "What's your problem now?" His voice carried over the rain, sharp and impatient, like I was interrupting something important. I walked straight to them, water soaking through my shoes. "This," I said, holding the contract up between us. The ink was running, but my name at the top was still clear. "You forged my signature. $20,000. Debt that isn't mine." Mom's eyes darted to the paper, then to me. Her mascara was already smudged from the rain, but fresh tears cut new tracks down her cheeks. "Only you can save Diego from the loan sharks, mija, please?" I laughed once, short and bitter, because the alternative was screaming. "Save him? This isn't about saving him. It's about you selling me out to keep him afloat." Diego stepped forward, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. "You're selfish, Mia. Always have been. You'd rather watch me drown than help." That word, selfish, snapped something in me. Selfish? I gave you everything, every dollar I made, my scholarship, my time, my trust, and you used me, both of you. The rain was coming down harder now, plastering my hair to my face, running cold down my spine. Mom reached for my arm, but I pulled back. "You sold me out!" I shouted, the words tearing from my throat before I could stop them. For a second, all I could hear was the rain on the pavement and the hum of the neon sign across the street. Then Diego looked away, jaw tight, and Mom's hand dropped to her side. The coffee bean charm was warm in my palm, even through the rain. I stared at it, the tiny silver edges catching the light, then let it fall. It hit the wet pavement with a sound too soft for what it meant, the chain coiling like a dead thing. "I'm done," I said. My voice was steady now, almost quiet. "I'm not your safety net anymore." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, just beyond the glow of the courtyard light. The vest guy, standing under the awning of the building across the street, watching. His face was shadowed, but the gleam of that ridiculous vest was unmistakable. The sight of him made the air feel heavier, the space between us charged. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like he'd been waiting for this moment. I turned away before either of them could answer. My heart was breaking, but my steps felt lighter than they had in years. The rain hadn't stopped, but by morning it was just a fine mist, clinging to the windows like it didn't want to let go. I moved through the apartment in silence, the sound of my suitcase wheels dragging over the warped wood floor, the only thing breaking it. The fake contract was gone, filed with the police, copied for the lawyer I'd hired late last night. My bank accounts were locked, every password changed. It had taken hours, my hands shaking over the keyboard, but with each call and each form filled out, the grip they had on me loosened a little. Diego's door stayed closed. Mom's, too. I didn't knock. The place looked smaller with my things packed away, just clutter and cigarette smoke left behind. In the corner of the living room, a stack of Diego's guitar cases leaned like they might collapse. On the kitchen counter, the chipped mug Mom used as an ashtray sat overflowing. I didn't touch it. I stopped at my bedroom doorway and looked around one last time. The posters had long since come down, but I could still picture the girl who'd taped them there, 18 and certain that someday she'd leave this place because she wanted to, not because she had to. From the top drawer, I took the cracked coffee bean charm. The chain was tangled, the silver dulled from years against my skin. I slipped it into my pocket. On my desk sat a framed photo of Mom and me, taken when I was 6. Her hair was still dark then, her smile wide, one arm wrapped around me like she'd never let go. I set it in the center of the empty kitchen table. She could have that version of me. At the door, I didn't look back. The cab ride to the airport was quiet except for the driver's radio, soft jazz crackling through the static. Miami blurred past the window. Pastel buildings, palm trees dripping from the morning rain, neon signs still humming from the night before. Every block felt like a page I was finally turning. Inside the terminal, the air smelled of coffee and jet fuel. People hurried past with rolling bags, their voices blending into one low, constant hum. I checked my ticket for the 10th time, as if the flight to Chicago might vanish if I didn't hold on to it tight enough. Carla's last message was still open on my phone. "You have a place here. Fresh start." She didn't ask for details, and I hadn't given her any. That was the thing about Carla. She understood that sometimes silence was the only way to keep a story from swallowing you whole. Boarding was called, and I joined the slow-moving line. The suitcase handle was warm in my palm from the walk inside. I kept my eyes forward, not wanting to catch sight of anyone who might look too familiar. The plane was cold, the air conditioning humming above my head. I took the window seat, slid my bag under the chair in front of me, and let my forehead rest against the glass. As we taxied out, the city stretched below, a patchwork of rooftops and narrow streets. The clouds swallowed us in minutes, turning the world outside into a soft, endless white. Relief came first, sharp and clean, like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. Then came the ache, low and steady, for the family I thought I had, and the one I'd finally admitted didn't exist. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the coffee bean charm, and turned it over in my fingers. Cracked, but still whole. I held it until the plane leveled out and the sunlight broke through, spilling gold over the clouds. "I'm leaving you behind," I thought, watching the sky open up. "But why does it still hurt?" Chicago felt like a different planet from Miami. Colder, sharper, and somehow safer. The skyline was a jagged crown against the winter sky, and every morning I walked to the cafe with my hands wrapped around a paper cup, steam curling into the air like a promise. The cafe wasn't mine, but it was the closest I'd been to my dream in years. Warm light spilled over the polished wood counter, the hiss of the espresso machine a steady heartbeat in the background. Regulars knew my name, tipped in folded bills, and never asked questions I didn't want to answer. At night, I'd walk home through streets strung with white lights, the air smelling faintly of roasted chestnuts from a cart on the corner. I was saving again, slowly, quietly, one envelope at a time in a locked tin under my bed. Each deposit felt like a step further from them. But safety, I've learned, is always temporary. It was a Tuesday night, cold enough that my breath hung in front of me when I saw him. I was locking up the cafe, the keys jingling in my pocket, when a shape caught at the edge of the streetlight. The vest was the first thing I recognized, garish, catching the light with every slight move. He stood on the opposite corner, half in shadow, watching. The noise from the street seemed to fade, replaced by the faint rush of my own pulse in my ears. I didn't move at first, just stared. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, but his eyes, even from across the street, I could feel the weight of that stare. The memory of Miami's humid nights pressed in, rain on the pavement, neon in the dark, him leaning over a table with Diego. My hand went to my coat pocket, fingers curling around the cracked coffee bean charm. The silver was icy, biting into my palm. I took my phone out with my other hand, dialing before my thoughts could scatter. When my lawyer answered, I didn't bother with hello. "Check everything," I said. "Accounts, credit, property, everything. I want to know if anyone's tried to get to me." I crossed the street quickly, not toward him but away, keeping to the brighter blocks. I didn't look back until I reached the next corner. He was still there, still watching. Fear slid down my spine, cold and deliberate, but there was something else tangled with it, something sharper. I'd left Miami to escape their games, their debts, their way of using me like a pawn. I wasn't about to hand over my new life. By the time I reached my apartment building, my heart had steadied. I looked up at the lit windows above and thought I escaped, but they're still chasing me. Inside, I locked every bolt, then sat by the window, coffee bean charm still in my hand, eyes on the street below. The city lights flickered against the glass, and somewhere in the shadows, I knew he was still out there. The next morning, the city was all glass and steel under a pale winter sun. I'd just finished steaming milk for a cappuccino when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. It was Carla. "Some guy asked about you at the cafe, claiming he's family. Looked like that Miami creep." I froze mid-pour, the hiss of the steam wand suddenly too loud. I glanced toward the front windows as if he might still be out there, leaning in the shadows, watching through the glass. My thumbs hovered over the screen. Vest? Her reply came fast. Yeah, shiny thing, like he thought he was in Vegas. He looked shady, Mia. Be careful. The hum of conversation in the cafe faded under the rush of my pulse. I set the cup down, foam trembling on the surface. In the corner, a couple laughed over shared pastries. The normalcy of it made the knot in my stomach tighter. I slipped my phone into my pocket and finished my shift on autopilot, every jingle of the door making my shoulders tense. Back in my apartment, I locked the door behind me, the click echoing louder than usual. My place was small but bright, big windows facing the skyline, a plant Carla gave me sitting on the sill. Usually it felt like a refuge. Today it felt like a stage with too many open doors. I sat on the couch and opened Diego's social media. I hadn't looked in months, telling myself distance was cleaner. But now, scrolling past filtered selfies and old band shots, I found it. A photo posted yesterday. He was in a casino, chips stacked high in front of him. The caption, "Big wins soon." My mouth went dry. I stared at it until the colors blurred. The vest guy in Chicago wasn't a coincidence. Diego hadn't let go, and whatever game he was playing, I was still a piece on the board. The coffee bean charm was on the table beside me. I picked it up, the crack catching against my thumb. Its weight was grounding, but it also reminded me of every time I'd been pulled into his orbit, thinking I could survive it. I stood and checked the deadbolt. Then I dug a new set of locks from the hardware bag I'd bought months ago and never used. The drill whined in the quiet apartment, metal shavings catching the afternoon light. By the time I finished, the sun had dipped low, casting the skyline in bruised gold. I moved from window to window, blinds drawn, my reflection sliding over the glass. Each time I glanced out, I expected to see that flash of a vest under a streetlight. The air felt tighter, like the walls were leaning in. Diego's still pulling strings, I thought, turning the charm over in my hand. How far will he go? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to wait to find out. The city outside my window was a mosaic of lights, each one flickering against the black glass like it had something to say. I was halfway through reheating leftover soup when my laptop chimed, a new email. The subject line was just one word, sorry. I almost deleted it without opening, but my fingers didn't listen. I screwed up, Mia. The first line sat there, blunt and strange. I didn't know he'd come after you. I thought he was an investor, someone who could help me turn things around. I didn't realize until it was too late. I scrolled, my stomach tight. He said he was in rehab for gambling, had been there 2 weeks, that he'd had time to think about what he'd done, time to see how far he'd pushed me away. I regret using you, he wrote. Mom sold the apartment to cover what I owed. We're in a motel now. She doesn't say much. I don't blame her. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. It was the first time in years I'd seen him string regret into words without twisting them into excuses. And yet, my eyes kept going back to the part about the investor, the way he'd casually given out my Chicago address like it was nothing more than an entry on a form. On the desk beside me, the coffee bean charm caught the light from the desk lamp, its crack casting a tiny shadow across the wood. I reached for it, the metal cool against my skin. In another paragraph, he asked if we could do a video call. No money, no strings, just a conversation. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box, my fingers hovering. Memories pushed in. The sound of his laughter in that Miami bar, the weight of the fake contract. Mom's voice telling me only I could save him. I closed my eyes. I could almost feel the vest guy's stare again, heavy and cold from across the street. When I opened them, the cursor was still blinking. I typed, "Fine. 1 call. That's it." The send button glowed blue under my mouse. I clicked it before I could change my mind. City lights danced on the glass of my window, fractured by the thin layer of frost creeping along the edges. I held the charm tight, wondering if this was the start of something better, or just another way for history to repeat. Can I trust him, I thought, or is this another trap? The video call connected after a few rings, his face flickering onto the screen. Diego looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, the fluorescent rehab lighting casting shadows under his eyes. "Mia," he started, voice rough like he'd been chewing gravel. I know I don't deserve, I cut in, not unkind, but firm. Don't start with that. Just tell me why you wanted this call. He took a breath, hands twisting in his lap. Rehab's, it's a lot. Stripping you down, making you look at every stupid thing you've done. I see it now, how I used you, how I dragged you into my mess. I'm sorry. His eyes darted toward the camera, then away. I'm trying to get better. I want you to know that. For a moment, I just watched him. The pixelated frame made it easier somehow, like there was still a wall between us. I need time, I said finally. No money, no games, no guilt trips. If you ever want to be in my life again, it has to be on my terms. He nodded slowly, like each word was a weight. I get it. I'm trying. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the faint hum from my heater. Behind me, Chicago's skyline gleamed through the window, lights scattered across the dark like pieces of something broken but still beautiful. I reached for the coffee bean charm lying on the table. It was cracked, the chain dulled, but it had survived everything, just like me. I let it dangle between my fingers, catching the city lights in its tiny fissures. I'm free, I thought, the words settling into me. But will I ever let them back in? After we ended the call, I stayed by the window, the laptop screen still glowing behind me. I thought about that girl in Miami who had measured her worth by how much she could give away, who believed family loyalty meant swallowing her own dreams. She was gone. Now the coffee shop I'd been planning for a decade didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. It felt like a blueprint. Some scars fade, some stay. Maybe that's the point. You build around them, not in spite of them. I turned back to my laptop, opened a new browser tab, and stared straight into the camera. Have you ever had to protect your dreams from family? I asked. Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more real-life dramas coming. The red recording light winked at me like it knew. This wasn't an ending, just another beginning.